The email subject line read, "Outstanding balance, $347,219.84. Lila Warren stared at the screen, confused. She almost deleted it, thinking it was another scam. But when she saw the sender's name, her chest tightened. It was from her mother, Marjorie Warren. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. Inside was a long list. Diapers, formula, school shoes, doctor visits, birthday cakes. Every expense carefully written, like a business report. At the bottom, one line stood out in bold capital letters. Total cost of raising a failure. Lila felt her throat burn. She read it again, hoping she misunderstood. But the words didn't change. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a joke. It was meant to hurt. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the screen as memories rushed back. Her mother's sharp tone. The way nothing was ever enough. Good grades were expected. Silence was attitude. Tears were manipulation. Growing up, love always felt like something she had to earn. And now, even that had a price tag. Lila scrolled slowly, each line making her feel smaller. It wasn't about money. It was about shame. About reminding her that, in her mother's eyes, she had always been a disappointment. Her hands shook as she closed the email. In that moment, Lila understood something painful but clear. This wasn't just a message. It was a declaration of war, and her own mother had started it. Lila didn't need to reread the email to understand it. The message had been written long before that night. Growing up, her mother cared more about how the family looked than how it felt. Marjorie wanted perfect photos, perfect manners, and perfect children. Lila learned early that mistakes were not forgiven. They were remembered. If she brought home good grades, her mother asked why they weren't higher. If she stayed quiet, she was called cold. If she spoke up, she was told she was disrespectful. Nothing ever landed in the right place. At dinner, Marjorie compared her to others without saying names. "Some girls know how to make their parents proud," she would say, glancing at Lila's plate. Lila would lower her eyes and eat in silence. Her younger brother, Evan, lived under different rules. When he failed a test, it was boys being boys. When he forgot chores, Marjorie laughed it off. She bragged about him to neighbors, calling him her second chance. Lila became invisible standing next to him. She tried harder every year. Cleaner room. Better grades. Less emotion. She learned how to disappear inside her own house. But approval never came. Looking back now, Lila understood something painful. The bill was not sudden anger. It was the final version of a story her mother had been telling for years. That Lila was a mistake that needed explaining. And now Marjorie had finally put that story into numbers. Lila stared at her phone for a long time before pressing call. There was only one person she could think of, her grandmother, Dorothy Hale. Growing up, Grandma Dorothy had been gentle in quiet ways. She slipped extra food onto Lila's plate. She brushed her hair slowly. She never raised her voice. When Lila stayed at her house, the air felt lighter. The phone rang twice before Dorothy answered. "Sweetheart," her grandmother said softly. Lila's voice shook as she explained the email. The amount. The list. The final line. She expected anger. Or comfort. Maybe even shock. Instead, there was silence. Not the kind that meant confusion, but the kind that felt heavy. After a long moment, Dorothy spoke again. "Did your mother finally send it?" The words made Lila's stomach drop. "Finally," she whispered. Dorothy exhaled slowly. "I was afraid of this day." Lila felt cold spread through her chest. This wasn't new. This wasn't sudden cruelty. It had been waiting. Her grandmother didn't interrupt or ask questions. She already knew the shape of it. She told Lila to sit down, to breathe, to listen. "I hoped she wouldn't," Dorothy said quietly. "But your mother has always kept score." Lila pressed her hand to her mouth. All those years she thought she was alone in it. All those nights she believed no one saw what was happening. Someone had seen. And somehow that truth hurt even more. Because if Grandma knew, then the silence had been a choice. And the bill wasn't the beginning. It was just the moment the truth finally arrived. Dorothy asked Lila to come see her the next day. When Lila arrived, her grandmother looked smaller somehow, her hands folded tightly in her lap. "I need to tell you something," Dorothy said. She admitted that years ago, when Lila was still a child, she had confronted Marjorie. She told her that love should never come with conditions. That children were not debts to be collected later. Marjorie had listened with a calm smile. Then she sent a letter. Dorothy's voice shook as she explained. The letter warned that if she interfered again, Marjorie would cut her off from Lila completely. No visits. No calls. No holidays. I was afraid, Dorothy whispered. I thought some presents was better than none. So she stayed quiet. She kept sending birthday cards. She hugged Lila when she could. She avoided conflict and told herself she was protecting her granddaughter. But silence didn't protect anyone. Dorothy looked down, ashamed. Every time I saw you shrinking, I told myself it wasn't that bad. That your mother would soften. She never did. Lila felt a strange mix of anger and sadness. Her grandmother hadn't meant to hurt her, but the damage was real. Love that stays quiet can still leave scars. Dorothy wiped her eyes. I can't change what I didn't do, she said. But I can tell you the truth now. Lila nodded slowly, her chest tight. She realized betrayal doesn't always come from cruelty. Sometimes it comes from fear. And that made it harder to forgive. Dorothy reached into a drawer beside her chair and pulled out a thin envelope. Her hands trembled as she placed it on the table between them. I changed my will months ago, she said quietly. Lila looked up, startled. Why? Not because I was kind, Dorothy replied. Because I was guilty. She explained that the silence she chose had weighed on her every night. Watching Lila grow into pain she never caused had finally pushed her to act. Dorothy slid the papers toward her. Read the third paragraph, she said. Lila unfolded the document slowly. Her eyes moved across the page until her breath caught. Marjorie's name was there, but not under beneficiaries. It was under outstanding obligations. Lila read the words again, certain she had misunderstood. Her mother wasn't listed as an heir. She was listed as a debtor. The amount made Lila's hands shake. It was nearly the same number as the invoice Marjorie had sent her. Down to the cents. Lila felt her heart pound as the meaning settled in. This wasn't anger written in ink. It was accounting. Quiet. Precise. Dorothy nodded. Your mother has taken money for years, she said. And she kept records. So did I. Lila looked up, stunned. The bill she received wasn't random cruelty. It had been copied, mirrored, turned around. For the first time since opening that email, Lila felt something shift inside her. Not triumph. Not relief. Control. No yelling. No confrontation. Just truth waiting patiently on paper. The war her mother started had already answered back. And it didn't need to raise its voice. Dorothy sat back slowly, as if the truth itself was heavy. The money your mother always talked about, she said. She didn't earn it. Lila looked up. Dorothy explained that after her husband passed away, he left a private fund. It was meant for one purpose only, Lila's education and future. College. Stability. A start that would make life easier than it had been for them. Marjorie was given access to manage it. At first, she claimed it was for school fees. Then for tutoring. Then for family needs. Over time, the money disappeared into new furniture, vacations, and a lifestyle Marjorie said she deserved. Whenever Lila asked for help later, her mother would say, After everything I've done for you, you still want more? Now Lila understood why. The fund had been emptied long ago. Dorothy's voice cracked. Your mother didn't want to admit she used money meant for you, she said. So she rewrote the story. Instead of a mother who took, Marjorie made herself a victim who gave too much. The bill wasn't about being paid back. It was about washing her hands clean. If Lila could be labeled a burden, then Marjorie wouldn't have to face what she'd done. Lila felt something steady form inside her. Not rage. Clarity. This wasn't revenge fueled by anger. It was balance. Truth correcting a lie that had lived too long. The invoice was never about money. It was about guilt and who would carry it. And Lila finally knew it didn't belong to her. Marjorie called a week later and asked Lila to come for dinner. Let's clear the air, she said, her voice soft in a way that never meant comfort. We're family. Lila almost said no. But after a long pause, she agreed. When she arrived, the table was set carefully, like always. Everything looked peaceful. Too peaceful. Marjorie greeted her with a tight smile, already waiting for an apology that hadn't been promised. Then Lila stepped aside. Dorothy walked in behind her. The room shifted. Marjorie's eyes widened for a second before she masked it. Evan sat stiffly, staring at his plate. No one spoke at first. They sat down. Plates were filled. Small talk tried to survive but failed quickly. Marjorie sighed dramatically. I hope we can move past all this, she said, glancing at Lila. I never meant to hurt you. Lila didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry. She simply reached into her bag and placed a folder on the table. I'm not here to argue, she said calmly. I'm here to understand. Dorothy folded her hands in her lap, silent but present. Marjorie frowned. What is that supposed to mean? Lila opened the folder slowly. Papers rustled. The sound felt louder than shouting. I just want us to talk honestly tonight, Lila said. Her mother shifted in her chair. For the first time, Marjorie realized this dinner wasn't about forgiveness. It was about truth. And Lila wasn't afraid anymore. She wasn't there to beg for love. She was there to stand still while the story finally changed. Lila took a slow breath and unfolded the printed email. I want to read something, she said quietly. Marjorie crossed her arms. If this is about that message, you're being dramatic. Lila didn't respond. She began reading. Diapers. Formula. School lunches. Winter coats. Each line was spoken clearly. Calmly. The room grew still. Evan stopped eating. Marjorie's smile faded with every word. When Lila reached the end, she paused. Total cost of raising a failure, she read softly. Silence followed. Not anger. Not shouting. Just wait. Then Lila placed another stack of papers on the table and slid them toward her mother. These are Grandma's records, she said. Marjorie frowned and flipped the pages. Her fingers tightened as numbers appeared. Dates, transfers, signatures. Dorothy finally spoke. These are the funds my husband left for Lila's education, she said steadily. You redirected them. Every dollar is documented. Marjorie's face drained of color. That's not how it happened, she snapped. Dorothy didn't raise her voice. You are listed in my will, she continued, not as an heir, but as a debtor. The word landed hard. Lila watched as her mother searched for control and found none. No one interrupted. No one defended her. The story Marjorie had told for years, the sacrifice, the suffering, the burden, collapsed quietly in front of her. Lila didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply folded the papers and said, I just wanted the truth to sit where the lies used to be. For the first time, Marjorie had nothing left to say. And the room finally understood who had really been keeping the receipts. Marjorie pushed her chair back suddenly. This is ridiculous, she said sharply. You're twisting everything. She pointed at Dorothy. You filled her head with this. Then at Lila. You've always exaggerated. Always playing the victim. Her voice grew louder, faster, chasing control that was slipping away. She blamed stress. She blamed grief. She blamed everyone in the room except herself. Evan stayed silent. He stared at the table, jaw tight. For once, he didn't defend her. He didn't speak at all. Lila watched her mother carefully. She felt no urge to interrupt. No need to explain. The truth had already been said. When Marjorie finally paused, waiting for a response, Lila lifted her eyes. I just want to ask one thing, she said calmly. The room went still. If I'm such a failure, Lila continued, why did you need me to carry your shame? The words weren't loud. They weren't angry. They were final. Marjorie opened her mouth, then closed it. The familiar excuses didn't come. For the first time, there was nothing she could twist into a story that made her look good. Her authority cracked in that moment. Not because someone shouted, but because everyone understood. The problem had never been Lila. The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable. Something old broke in that room. The version of the past Marjorie had controlled for years. Lila felt lighter, not because she had won, but because she had finally stepped out of the role written for her. She wasn't the burden. She wasn't the mistake. She was just the truth standing in the open. And her mother could no longer rewrite it. Months passed after that night. There were no dramatic phone calls. No apologies waiting on voicemail. Life simply became quiet. Lila moved into a small apartment with sunlight in the mornings. She worked, cooked simple meals, and learned what peace felt like when it wasn't borrowed from anyone else. The family didn't gather anymore. Messages stayed unanswered. The distance felt strange at first, then necessary. One evening, while sorting old papers, Lila found the printed invoice. For a moment, her chest tightened. Then she did something unexpected. She framed it, not because it still hurt, but because it reminded her of what she survived. The words no longer defined her. They showed how far she had come from a house where love had conditions and silence had a cost. She didn't wait for forgiveness. She didn't chase closure from people who never offered safety. She built it herself, quietly. Sometimes she thought about her mother. Not with anger, but with clarity. Some people create debts to avoid facing their own choices. Those debts aren't real. But the damage is. And eventually the truth always collects. Lila learned that freedom doesn't arrive loudly. It doesn't need witnesses or celebration. It shows up in mornings without fear, in choices made without guilt, in breathing without apology. There was no invoice for peace, no total to repay, just a life moving forward, clean, honest, and her own. And for the first time, Lila wasn't trying to prove her worth. She was simply living it. If this story touched your heart, support the channel by liking and subscribing. Remember, emotional control and financial manipulation are real forms of harm. Learning to recognize them is the first step toward protecting your peace. Your worth is not a debt. You never owe anyone your dignity.